The girl told His Imperial Majesty that she was now his bride. The only person who can stand beside him is Scarlet Armand. After that, the girl bowed to him. She asked His Majesty the Carlior to love only her. It's a world from a romantic fantasy novel called The Private Life of a Tyrant. Emperor Carlior, the main character of the novella, is a tyrant who has committed many cruel acts, among them the murder of his siblings. He meets the main character, falls in love with her, becomes a very gentle man, and even bows down to her. Then his private life was kept secret. The girl didn't understand if a tyrant becomes a gentle man at the end. Only what was the point of it all? She's 20 years old, likely to die as the main villain of this novel, all because she's in the body of the tyrant's fiancé, Scarlet Armand. Scarlet is madly in love with the Carlior, so he bullies the protagonist. Later, Scarlet dies at his own hands. She would be killed by the main character somewhere in the middle of the novella. The girl, sitting on the bed, thought she was lucky to get into the story before the events began. She thought she was going to die as soon as she got here, but she has a little more time. As soon as the main storyline started, Scarlet immediately started bullying Shirla. If the girl doesn't touch the main character, she can survive. A tyrant who felt love for the first time in his life, a young swordmaster, and the wisest man of this era. But what kind of a wise man is he who treats no one but his close friends as human beings? The reason why His Majesty has the title of the wisest man is because only a few people have more knowledge than him. I guess Scarlet really is a bad judge of character. I'm not without my sins, she thought. She didn't understand how she could marry off her only daughter to such a bad guy and have her betrothed to a tyrant. When she moved into Scarlet's body, she had the girl's memories, and in those memories, the Duke was very cold. One day he hid her and locked her in a room, telling her she would be there until morning. No matter how much he bullies Scarlet, she can't get used to it. When they attend important events, he pretends to care about her. But in life, he always ignores her. In her memories, her family was unhappy and dysfunctional. Therefore, the girl who has fallen into this world realizes that she needs to escape as soon as possible. But right now she had a bigger problem, namely the engagement. On the table was an invitation to the Emperor's birthday ball, which would be held in a few days. This is Scarlet's first encounter with him as a bride, and a sign of the beginning of the original story, as well as Scarlet's love. And this is exactly the moment when everything goes wrong. In Scarlet's memories, she only saw the tyrant from the back, so she doesn't understand what's wrong with him. But she's not alone, so she's not about to fall in love with him. But there's a problem. She doesn't know when the main character will show up. Running away would be pointless if the engagement wasn't broken, and besides, she had no money. The girl thought, maybe we should break the engagement right now. She imagined approaching Carlior and asking him to call off the wedding, and then she dies, and he asks if she's trying to insult him. Scarlet realized that wasn't going to work, so at this rate the remaining memories could become her future. She realized that she would rather be abandoned than killed. And then she wondered, what would happen if she forced him to break up? An imperial engagement involves a magical contract. In order to break it, one of the parties must die, or both parties must be in agreement. Realizing that she needs to get consent, as the contract states, she must continue to see her fiancé. No matter how subdued the tyrant is, that cannot change. That's when Scarlet realized what she had to do to make the guy get tired of her. She would pretend to be crazy and wait for the engagement to break off. Someone suddenly knocked on her door, the maid. She said that she had been crying and laughing alone for the past hour, asking if she was all right. Day by day the nights grow darker. Soon enough, the day of the ball will come. This is the first time someone is so kind to her. Even if he kills her, it doesn't change the fact that His Majesty is a kind person. Those were Scarlet's memories. The girl didn't understand why she thought that. After all, he wasn't really such a nice person. Then suddenly her musings were interrupted by a maid who came into her room and asked if she was all right. Scarlet said she was fine, and thought to herself that the only one she had seen out of the servants in all these few days was Lucy. Lucia asked that the girl wait a little while and she would bring her the dress. Scarlet thought on that occasion that it might be about the engagement. She wouldn't linger here. She didn't understand why she had to prepare from the middle of the day if the ball would only take place at night. Afterward, she looked in the mirror and said that her body was beautiful enough. The maid came to the book and asked the girl to look at the dress. Scarlet was very frightened, because the maid came unexpectedly. When Scarlet saw several dresses in the maid's hands, she took the pink one and looked closely at it. I asked her if she wanted to wear some gorgeous dress. The girl replied that she didn't want that, but chose this pink dress. Lucy asked if she really liked the dress because it was too plain, but Scarlet said it wasn't bad and just needed some accessories. Lucy asked if she really wanted to attend a banquet at the Imperial Palace in such an inconspicuous way, but Scarlet said nothing, and simply walked away. As the girl passed the other maids, they began to whisper, saying that a similar girl was crazy. Scarlet heard it all, but it's exactly the reaction she expected. Even with her modest outfit, she's still as beautiful as ever. She used to think the peach color didn't suit her, but it turned out to be quite the opposite. As they put on some jewelry, Scarlet asked Lucy, "She's proud of herself too, isn't she? Because it really should have been embellished." After a while, Scarlet arrived and a maid ran out to her asking for help. The girl thought that, of course, for the Emperor's birthday banquets, this dress was indeed plain, but her madness would begin with this outfit. When she got into the carriage, she thought that this cushion felt very nice to the touch, and suggested that it might be a matter of this family being very rich. When she got into the carriage and looked at the man, she thought he had a very sinister look, and that he was trying to burn her with his gaze. She thought that this man treated her daughter like garbage and beat her all the time. She wondered if she would be afraid of him, but then she realized that it was unlikely, because she tried to avoid such nasty people. When Isar Arman saw the girl turn away, he asked her if she had eaten something wrong. This guy is Scarlet's half-brother, the only person who helped Scarlet when she was sentenced to death in the original story. And when she tried to commit suicide, Isar was the first to recognize it and save her. As he bandaged her hands, he said the danger was over, but they still needed to watch her. After briefly thinking about it, Scarlet just sighed heavily. Maybe he was worried about her then, and had yelled at her because of it. If you think about Scarlet's memories, Isar was kind to her. She thinks that's important, and she wondered if she should treat him special. When she looked at her half-brother, she thought, "Why does he have that look on his face again? It's a little scary." Then she pretended as if nothing had happened, asking him what was wrong. Isar was shocked and asked if she really didn't understand. Started to say that her dress girl interrupted him, and I said, "Doesn't it look beautiful on her? I mean, she looks adorable in it." When he heard this, he was shocked, and said that the rumors about her going crazy turned out to be true, and laughed out loud. But then he covered his mouth with his hand and told them not to bring it up again. Scarlet wondered what had happened. Isar has been careful with his words lately. When she said that, she didn't think she'd ever had a conversation like this. Duke Armand immediately struck his fist and shouted at her, asking if she thought it was okay to dishonor her family like that. He told her to get out of the carriage right away because she wouldn't be traveling like that. The girl thought, she kept wondering when it would explode, and she asked, "Is it because of the dress?" She said that the Duke had said the other day she had bought a lot of luxurious clothes, and this time she wore a very modest dress. Scarlet also added that if it affects the prestige of the family, he shouldn't blame only her. It seems that yesterday his son came home drunk. The rumor that he was walking drunk in the streets must have already gone around the capital. Scarlet smiled and asked, "Family prestige? Isn't that what you're worried about?" Scarlet thought, how's that for him? He must be disappointed because Scarlet's original character never crossed Scarlet. If the Duke can only talk, then he shouldn't mess with her. And at that moment, Scarlet looked at her half-brother. She thought he would be angry because she had betrayed him. She didn't understand why he was so calm. When the Duke wanted to yell at his daughter, Duchess Melia Armand interrupted and told them to stop. And there are no idiots here. As soon as the Duke's first wife died, he immediately brought in another. She was the Duke's romantic partner, but he left her right before the wedding. The problem was that after their engagement, they had a child. And that child was Isar Armand. That was the reason why Isar was older than Scarlet. He probably never liked her, since she was evidence of the Duke's betrayal. Scarlet could understand her, but she was being cruel to the girl. One day the Duchess ordered that the girl be kept in a wrist restraint until she came to her senses. Poor little Scarlet screamed that she would not do it again, and begged to be let out. You couldn't take your anger out on a girl. Melia told Scarlet to let His Excellency explain himself. Then the girl turned to Isar and said that if you think about it that way, the rumors about her singing in the square every time she gets drunk are true. It was as if the Duchess looked at the girl. At that moment, Scarlet thought to herself, so that she could keep a better eye on her son. Scarlet said that rumors are not always true, but there is no smoke without fire. and then she turned to Madame, and told her not to worry so much about her if she didn't want her to call her mother. The Duchess was very angry. She turned away, and Scarlet thought it would be nice if she dissolved her marriage, calling her crazy. Scarlet thought it would take a while. They kept driving, and the girl thought she should get some sleep before starting another verbal altercation. And at that moment, the girl had one very unpleasant dream. She was sitting on the floor crying, and some dark smoke was enveloping her. At that moment everything stops and Scarlet falls to the ground. The girl realized that it was just an unpleasant dream. As she gets out of the wagon, she thinks she really is crazy if she was able to fall asleep. Luckily, she wasn't too late, and of course her relatives didn't wake her up. She was worried about the dream she had had, but she thought it was just a dream, and she shouldn't worry because she had better things to do. When she stepped out, she saw a huge mansion in front of her and thought that now it was time to meet her future fiancé. When she got to the front door, she asked if she was late and asked to be let in. She thought everything would go fine. The guard who was standing outside said there was no way he would open, because His Majesty was already inside, and he couldn't announce her arrival. Scarlet thought that he was suggesting that she go through the back door unnoticed, but then her plan wouldn't work. So she said she knew and didn't care, and asked him to just open the door. The guard had no choice, so he said okay, and the doors opened. When Scarlet walked in, she started looking around and realized that the inside was just gorgeous. The tyrant had said that his birthday celebration would be more modest than the former emperor's. Scarlet wondered what the last celebration had been like. The girl started to walk past people and thought, "Where is her fiancé, the tyrant?" Everyone was whispering around, saying that it was Lady Armand. The girls understood why she was dressed like that. Scarlet thought the dress was enough to get their attention. When she looked to the side, she saw some man who was flanked by girls, and she thought he was attractive. She wondered if he was the emperor. When the man looked in her direction, the girl noticed the hair. He was blonde. The book said the emperor had silver hair and violet eyes. Then this guy's not the emperor. As she walked past the large number of people, Scarlet kept thinking, "Where is the emperor?" She couldn't find him. As she walked past the girls, she overheard them talking. "Lady Fleda, look over there. There are rumors that the daughter about the Armand family has gone mad." "I don't think it's a rumor at all." Scarlet looked in their direction, thought these girls reminded her of a traffic light, and casually shouted it out loud. One of the girls asked Lady Fleda what a traffic light was, but she didn't know, and decided to change the subject to the fact that she was crazy. At that moment, Scarlet walked up to her and asked, did she want to die? If she didn't, she'd better not contact her. She told the lady that she shouldn't treat her like that. And when Scarlet left, the girl couldn't stand it and began to rest in fear. At that moment, Scarlet thought she was going to die, because it was her, not the girl. Why bother? Walking even further, she thought. There are a lot of people in this hall, but no one approaches her. Apparently everyone is avoiding her. She thought it might be because of the bad rumors. Scarlet went there to meet an important person. In the original novel, it was written that the heroine fell for the tyrant's politeness, but he was the one she was looking for, because in her life, the tyrant was the only such man. The girl thought Scarlet was very foolish. After all, it was dangerous to fall in love with someone like that. Behind her, she heard a question. Is this the Lady Armand? Hearing that, the girl thought to herself, another one. She didn't understand why they were all talking so loud. After that, she decided to look at him. The girl turned around, bowed, and said that she was Scarlet Armand of the Armand family, greeting His Majesty the Emperor, and she thought to herself that the original Scarlet had fallen in love with not only was he polite, cold-blooded, handsome, but also clearly seductive. Suddenly the Emperor was surrounded by people and told that the rumors about the young lady were true. Scarlet thought that the ability to turn others into sea squids was not a bad thing. The girl thought that he was certainly handsome, but you shouldn't fall for his looks. This guy is a tyrant. He could easily slit her throat. The Emperor asked if she was all right. At that moment, Scarlet thought she needed to calm down, and when she raised her head and looked at him, she realized that he was very handsome. She didn't understand how such a man could be a tyrant. He had been so gentle with Shirley. Scarlet was interrupted by these thoughts, and she realized she needed to focus, because this wasn't what she had come for. With an inset bow, Scarlet says it's okay. And it's their first meeting, so she's a little nervous. Afterwards, she apologized to him. She said that she had a question and that she had heard that His Majesty liked magic. The girl asked if it was true. The emperor said that suppose if she wanted to show him something strange, it was better to give up the venture. When Scarlet looked at him, she realized he had an expression of profound insensitivity. The girl said it was their first meeting, so she had prepared something for him. Could he take a look at it? Carlior, she showed him, and he would not be surprised if she had prepared a poem for him. The girl told him not to worry, but to watch carefully. I wondered how much longer he could remain indifferent. Scarlet took the wineglass in her hand and said that with her magic, the answers of this dress would change to a dazzling red. After saying happy birthday to His Majesty the Emperor, she poured wine on herself. Afterwards she said that it was a very pleasant smell. When the dress was soaked with wine, she said, "Look, Your Majesty, this dress has turned an enchanting red." And she wondered what he thought of her now. The people around them were whispering, asking, "Did she really spill wine on herself right in front of His Majesty?" And Scarlet wondered how he was going to marry a psychopath like her. She asked His Majesty if it wasn't adorable, but Carlion didn't know what to say to him. He sat with his mouth open and just stared at her. Scarlet wondered if she could break off her engagement to him if she kept this up. Emperor Carlior once told Shirley that no one would have congratulated him on his birthday. But those words were lies. It was as if he was hiding his innermost thoughts. "Please don't do this," he said. Of course, he would like to hear those words from the main character. But if Scarlet says them, she's sure he won't like it at all. As she doused herself with wine, she hoped she'd managed to ruin her first impression, and realized she needed to keep it up. Then suddenly the Emperor tore into Duke Armin. The Duke immediately ran to him, and then the Emperor said that the young lady's condition seems to have worsened, and why doesn't he keep an eye on what's going on in their estate? The Duke said he would take her back right away, and taking his daughter by the hand, led her toward the exit. Thought that despite his murderous stare and chained to her, he looked amazing. This is his first ever encounter with someone so reckless. If things keep going this way, Scarlet wondered if she could be notified at once of the dissolution of the marriage contract. She thought it was the end, and let His Majesty wait. When the Duke and his daughter arrived at the carriage, he immediately began to yell at her, and ask if she had gone completely insane. He said it was a disgrace, and when they got home he would punish her severely. But the girl did not listen to him, and thought that he was too noisy. But still, she thought, today had been a good day for her. Her brother sat next to her and asked her if she was drunk. He also said that she also stinks. Scarlet thought he was like a little kid and then said, "Isn't that wonderful?" When Isar asked what exactly was marvelous, she said that couldn't he see that even in red she looked beautiful. When the Duchess got into the carriage with them, she told the girl to let the girl know that when they arrived, she would call the doctor. Scarlet was surprised and asked why. Melia then said that after what she said, then she decided to find a GP to set her mind right. She looked surprised and asked how it was, and thought that at this rate the marriage would be dissolved very soon. Perhaps she would even be removed from the title. Scarlet said that she had heard that His Majesty liked blood, and as his bride, she wanted to give him a special gift. And so, she, adorned with scarlet flowers from head to toe, wants to be in His Majesty's arms. Isar asked if she wouldn't die then. The girl said no way, and she and His Majesty are soulmates. She also said that she would ask him for a lock of his hair later, and that she would ask him for one lock every time she met him. The brother was very surprised and asked what it was for. Scarlet asked, what is it for? It will make her happy. She will put it under her pillow and go to sleep. She will do that until the wedding. Isar wanted to say that she had really lost her mind, but kept silent and just started looking out the window. At that moment, the girl wondered if she had overdone it. After a while, they arrived at the Duchy of Armand. When the carriage pulled up, the guy tending the horses wondered what had happened if they had decided to arrive so early. Thought maybe Miss Scarlet had done something wrong again. It bothered him, because things had been so quiet for the last month. When he went to the carriage to open the door, a woman's foot appeared in front of his face. He was very surprised at this. After that, Scarlet ran out. The Duchess asked him to catch her. When the boy tried, he failed. Then the Duchess yelled to get a doctor now because Scarlet was not well at all. While they were still driving, Isar said that his sister was really acting crazy. He asked what she would do if she really died. He said he just hated funerals. But then I interrupted you, Mom, and asked how he could say that. After that, she took Iskar out of the carriage and told him to go on his own. The boy was very surprised and wondered if she was serious about doing that to him. As the carriage drove on, before the Duke asked Scarlet what she was doing. But Scarlet asked if he knew she was His Majesty's bride, and told him to watch his language. She said she hoped they understood her, and then added that there should not be a single scratch on the body of an aristocrat's wife. Melia had been sure she was uneducated before, but now everything had changed, and it was as if the girl had been switched for some crazy person. To the splendid son of Carlior, His Majesty, like the moon about the water, flowers, trees, and birds. What a pity we parted so suddenly at the party. Writing a letter to Scarlet. When she wanted to write to make their next appointment, she wondered what was wrong with her. She felt disgusted by those words. She hopes it will only last until the marriage contract is dissolved, but still needs to decide on a meeting date soon. The Emperor and his bride were always obliged to see each other a certain number of times a month, and records are kept of all meetings. She doesn't really like that kind of publicity. She doesn't want to give up being intrusive, so she wrote that she was giving His Majesty the opportunity to set a date and place for their first meeting. It's important to do crazy things in moderation and show it off. The perfect plan to fool a mistrustful tyrant. She wondered, what would the answer be if his reply letter included a schedule of meetings? So her actions yesterday had had no effect. Scarlet asked if Lucy could bring her ledger. This property was left by Scarlet's mother, the late Duchess of Armand. It's not much, just a couple of properties. But Scarlet from the original novella turned on Shirley with this one. When Scarlet looked in her notebook, she realized she had used up all her money on trinkets, so she had to borrow some from the elder of the family. After that, Lucy brought Mistress tea. When Scarlet saw it, she asked if she had done as she liked. As she thanked Lucy, she looked at her frightened face and thought she had it written all over her face. Scarlet really liked saying thank you, so she thanked the maid again. Leaving, Lucy said no problem and to let her call if she needed anything. When she left, the girl thought, then she was left with one problem. The amount of money was insignificant. Can't leave the duchy and become independent with those pennies. It was all that was left of Scarlet's savings. Then the girl thought she needed to learn how to earn money. Fortunately, there is one way. That's this fortune, even with a little money. It's a safe zone, to be more precise. It's a free land called Cradle. It was abandoned since magic wasn't supported in this place. But even though there were food problems, the capital still gave up land. The fairies, who were hiding in a safe zone, contacted the protagonist of the novella and immediately turned the place into a gold mine. Scarlet thought that if the fairy recognized her, she could take possession of all the riches, because the most precious treasure in this world was the fairy stone. And if Scarlet sells it, she'll have a lot of money. Thinking about it, the girl followed her out. The maid ran in and asked where she was going. Scarlet said she was going to the bank, but to get some money. That same evening, when the Emperor was alone, he took off his outer clothes and lay down on the bed because he was very tired. He thought about the situation that had happened during the day for him. It had been unbelievable. She stood before him unarmed and unafraid of anything. He remembered the words from his childhood when he had been told he was cursed, and it was better he had not been born. When you stand before His Highness, be careful how you express your emotions if you don't want to lose your head. These are the principles Scarlet has followed all her life, but on this day, she had broken them. Thinking about it, Carlior realized that the mood was definitely ruined now. The only thing worth mentioning is the name of a powerful family, even if Scarlet Armand is stupid. Because she is from a prestigious family whose influence cannot be ignored, the engagement cannot be broken off with her. Therefore, this is a problem for the Emperor. According to the research on the daughter of the Armand family, it is believed that she is a girl with a vicious and ruthless heart. The Emperor's aide told him to reconsider whether this person was really suitable for the role of Empress. Carlior was very surprised to hear that she was cruel, and he thought it would be difficult to understand Scarlet based on her actions alone. The Emperor didn't know what to do. The girl was obsessed with killing, but he didn't think she was only of one mind. He wondered if he should watch her for a while. Not the Scarlet Armand, but the true Scarlet. One day while Scarlet was drinking tea, a maid came up to her and told her that a return letter had arrived from the Imperial Palace. When she heard it, she said it was wonderful. She was hoping this letter would be about a breakup. But when she opened it, she saw that at the very top it said, "On a monthly schedule." When she read that, she realized that if he sent her her monthly schedule, she should bring in the heavy artillery. She'll make him know the depth of her madness, and then he'll regret his decision. As Carlior sat in his office, there was a knock at his door. The man said that he had come because he had been summoned, but that he had something to report. He said that a great deal of business had piled up, appeared to him since morning. When the emperor heard this, he asked what it was. The man said that it would not take much time. It was Carlior's crony, Prime Minister Count Clover. He said that the emperor had already eaten breakfast, so it was time to get to work. The emperor thought that he was actually working without food and sleeping only an hour at a time. But he realized that the Prime Minister already had everything, even written on his forehead. In the magic ball, the head of intelligence from amongst Carlior's cronies, namely Count Rumen, was speaking to the emperor. Clover thought his call could only mean that. But his thoughts were interrupted by the emperor, who told him to check the papers again. The Prime Minister didn't even doubt it. Rumen said that it simply could not be that his report was so terrible. He had a look like he was about to cry. But Clover thought that, whatever it was, if this investigation was about Armand's family, everything was falling into place. Their ancestors were the progenitors of the Callior and Rizabel families, those called heroes who stood shoulder to shoulder. Even the tyrant's cronies can't find out about what Armand's ancestors left to their family. But nevertheless, Scarlet behaves very openly. The emperor said he hoped they would be able to get a report on the investigation, because the information he had worked so hard to obtain was not needed, and asked if he had investigated everything thoroughly. Clover thought he was already overreacting. They were having difficulties, but as if he wouldn't shed a tear for Count Rumen. If all the work was shifted to him again, he would be furious. When Rumen wanted to say something in his defense, His Majesty cut the connection, so the magic ball became empty. At this time in his office, Count Rumen was trying to shout to His Majesty, but it was all to no avail. The Prime Minister thought at this rate he would start working overtime. The Count said he would start with him. Carlior told his assistant that in addition to investigating the Armand family, he needed to find out about Scarlet herself. At this moment, Clover thought that it had already been several weeks since she had been identified as the Emperor's bride. So he realized that it would be quite doable. He told the Emperor that it would be a bit difficult, but asked what exactly he needed to find out. Carlior told him to investigate whatever he wanted to find out first, and to pay attention to the unpleasant details. Clover said he listened and would do his best. He thought it would be a lot easier than investigating a whole family. He said that if that was the case, could the Emperor please share the official schedule with him, and he didn't think it was necessary to meet twice a month. Clover told the Emperor that he would be nearby during their dates, so it would be easier to gather information. He also said they should see each other again. Carlior remembered the beautiful Scarlet, who had surprised him, and said that no doubt they would meet again. Told the assistant to take care of schedules, sent an email to the Armand family. Meetings should be at least once a month. She leaves it all up to him. When Clover said that he understood and would do everything, he left. As he walked down the stairs, he wondered why the Emperor looked so happy, because this evil tyrant almost never rejoiced like this. He thought, is there really something about this girl, or has she done something to His Majesty? Clover thought she had seduced the Emperor and said she would crush the son of this country. He couldn't believe it. He thought Scarlet Armand might be dangerous, so he needed to check it out as soon as possible. When Scarlet read his letter, she thought that so-and-so had written, "What other schedule? I will be glad to see you. I'll invite Lady Armand to a meeting at the Imperial Palace tomorrow." He also added that she should come on foot. Scarlet was annoyed. She thought she was dog-walking him, but she also thought that obviously he wanted to break up soon. Then she wondered what was the best thing to do. She decided to impress by wearing only a different dress, so the same trick wouldn't work twice. Then she thought, what if I prepared gifts from the heart, but ones that would not be to the tyrant's liking? Thinking about it made her smile. The thought made her happy, and she realized she couldn't come to visit empty-handed. Scarlet remembered that there was a marvelous alley near the palace with shops. It was easy for her to get the things she needed. She bought grapefruits and white flowers. These were things the tyrant disliked. He especially hated picked white flowers. Scarlet doesn't understand why, because they smell just fine. She asked the salesman to sell her these and the white ones with the bright scent. When she picked up the bouquet, the salesman said that her lover would definitely like them. At that moment, the girl thought that he would definitely be horrified. When she was done shopping, she realized she could go home because she had bought everything for her plan. After a while she arrived at the mansion. Clover, seeing Lady, said that she was exactly 1 hour and minutes late. Scarlet said there was an emergency on the way, so she was running a little late, and told him not to worry. Clover said that this was His Majesty's last meeting for the day, but they still had time left. He said that he was the Prime Minister in charge of scheduling the meetings, and also gave his name. When Scarlet said she was pleased to meet him, Clover told her to hurry up because His Majesty was already waiting for her. Like the book said, he's a real workaholic. She hadn't seen him at the last reception. Scarlet was sure he'd fallen asleep somewhere. As they walked, Clover said that it was a pity she had arrived at night, because usually the magic light was lit at this time. But today, it had been extinguished by order of the Emperor. He also said that she could look at the Night Palace next time. Scarlet said she had a question for him. As they were walking, the girl casually asked where they were passing now, if it was a dungeon. Clover said that she was quite perceptive, though it was her first time in the Imperial Palace, but she was able to guess right away. And he patted her. As they stood in the middle of the dungeon, the girl laughed and thought to herself, would he really show up in a place like this? She wondered if Clover really thought she didn't know him. In the original story, the tyrant's personal life is more detailed, not only for the main characters, but also for Carlior's cronies, because they not only kept an eye on his private life, but also made fun of him. Based on the content of the novella, the Prime Minister has information about the tyrant's personal affairs. When Scarlet moved closer to Clover, he became very nervous, but the girl told him to hurry to His Majesty. Scarlet thought he was notorious for being shy. When they started to leave, he asked if he was all right. Clover thought, how could she ask such a thing? It was like he was face to face with disaster. But he'd said himself he was fine. Then Scarlet started wiping his cheek with a cloth, and asked if he was sure he was all right. Clover didn't realize who would make fun of a man like that on their first meeting, and the girl thought that the piece of cloth that had been torn off accidentally came in very handy. Well, then suddenly another voice appeared in the dungeon, the Emperor, and he asked what they were doing, stalling right in front of their noses. When Scarlet saw His Majesty, she was very surprised, but she quickly reacted by bowing and greeting him. Carlior, seeing the girl, said that Mrs. Armand had come after all. Scarlet said that she had been waiting all day for them to meet. Well, when the Emperor saw some kind of basket in her hands, he asked what it was and what it was for. Scarlet looked at the basket and said it was a gift. She had received an invitation from His Majesty, so it would be rude to come empty-handed. When she pulled white flowers out of the basket, she told him to look at them, and added that they were incredibly beautiful. When Clover saw this bouquet, he was shocked and almost screamed in horror. Scarlet didn't stop there. She pulled grapefruits out of the basket, and said she also brought this one, showing it directly to the Emperor. Carlior asked if it was a grapefruit. Scarlet replied that it was, and that she liked the fruit very much, which was why she had bought it. When she looked at the Emperor, she thought his facial expression was priceless. This was exactly what she was seeking. Scarlet then explained that it was wild grapefruit from Gress territory, a special commodity brought in by white mages. She asked, agreeing that it was incredibly tasty, right? The Emperor answered nothing to this, but called his Prime Minister Clover, and said that he looked very tired. When Scarlet heard this, she was surprised, but Carlior told his assistant to rest for a while, and he and the young lady would go inside. Clover said he obeyed His Majesty, and then he left. And the Emperor, turning to the girl, said that he would see her off. After that they walked through a dark door. As they walked, Scarlet thought that this awkward silence was frightening her. Maybe she should say something. She then turned to the Emperor and asked why he had ordered all the lights to be extinguished. Then, without letting him answer, she said it couldn't be. Could it be that he was trying to make the moment alone with each other shine brighter than ever? But Carlior said that he was just busy with work. The girl asked what kind of work he was doing, and he said that he couldn't put it on the schedule. The Emperor looked at the girl and asked what was wrong with her face. Scarlet said she was too hot, asked if he wanted her to help him with his work. The Emperor was surprised and asked if she would really help him. Scarlet said that if it were any other way, he wouldn't have chosen this time and place. She then asked what she could help him with. Scarlet also said that she guessed that His Majesty was going to ask her something. Then Carlior said that, as she had said, he had called her because he had some business to attend to. He said there was someone to meet and talk to. When the girl heard that, she giggled and asked who, and said she was good at it. The whole time they were walking to this mysterious meeting, Scarlet was giggling. The Emperor was tired of this, and he looked at her and told her to go faster. The girl thought that he was so selfish. She wondered what kind of underground dungeon this was. Scarlet didn't understand who would even go out in a place like this, but she knew for sure it wasn't a person in their right mind. Scarlet was walking and thought that she had better not accidentally meet his eyes. But then suddenly she heard someone's voices telling her to look at them. The man who was in the dungeon said he was innocent and asked the lady to help him. But then suddenly, as she was about to leave, he grabbed her and told her she couldn't just leave him. He grabbed her hand and told her not to go, because she should hear about his non-involvement. After all, she's kind. When Scarlet tried to tell him to let her go, the man only squeezed her harder, and she thought it hurt a lot. Then the Emperor called out to the young lady and told her to remove her hand. He looked very menacing and angry. After she took her hand away, there was blood everywhere, and Scarlet thought Charlene unlike the original, but she couldn't get her thoughts together. After it was over, the Emperor turned to the lady and asked if anything was wrong, and started wiping the blood from his face. At that moment, the lady thought he was just crazy. Scarlet fell to the floor and couldn't move. She was in shock. Then Carlior said that the Prime Minister was very busy. After that, he said that they had a long way to go, so they should hurry up. Then he began to put the sword, which was covered in blood, back into its sheath. When they went, the Emperor said that the person she was to meet was much farther away. Scarlet did not understand who she was to meet. When she looked at the Emperor, she realized that he had a surprisingly satisfied face. She wondered if the original story had portrayed him that way. Even though this was before she met the main character, he certainly doesn't seem like your average psychopath. Yeah, found after him, she thought. He'd like to smack him upside the smug head. When she took a swing at him, he shouted back, "Enough!" At that moment, the girl thought, did he really hear her thoughts? Carlior then turned to her, and the girl began to wave her hand nervously, saying that on a long journey, it wouldn't hurt to stretch a bit. As they approached the bars, they heard someone's voice saying that there were two paths to him, the best among them being rapprochement. Some older woman came out to them with a flower, and she said that she loved Sissy very much too, and also that she whispers very sweetly. When Scarlet saw it, she asked His Majesty what kind of woman it was, but without waiting for an answer, she turned to the woman and asked if she was okay. She was once called the Wise Seer, but now she's been locked up in a dungeon for 19 months without a trace. The old woman's predictions concerning the Armand family could not be so brazenly ignored. She had said then that there were two paths, among them the path of rapprochement. But this path leads to defeat, and Carlior will not be able to get a shred of happiness in his life. In addition to the clerics, the power of prophecy is wielded by the Armand family, in which the diviner deity of soothsayers sleeps. Scarlet asked the older woman who it was she was talking to. Other soothsayers recognize members of the Armand family, envy them, and suspect a secret. The Emperor thought he could use this elderly woman to learn more. Then Scarlet asked the old woman if she was talking to a fairy. The old woman said that Sissy was a fairy. When the girl got very close to the bars, Carlior told her not to get too close because the woman was a criminal who was pretending to be crazy. Scarlet wasn't listening to him. She asked the older fairy woman if it was true. Then that old lady said she didn't believe it either, to be honest. The fairy is only shown to people who have a pure heart. When Scarlet heard this, she said that she had always had less than pure thoughts about her emperor. And taking his hand, she laughed loudly. Hearing this, the old woman said that there was nothing to be done then, and she would not be able to see the fairies. Carlior, hearing the girl say "my emperor," asked if she meant it. Scarlet said that of course, they were on a date right now. When the girl said that, she thought about how fierce the emperor's face was right now. That was fine with her. And when the emperor wanted to say something, he was interrupted by an old woman stretching her hand out of the grate and saying that it had a peculiar flavor. But Carlior the Pope glared at her, and then the woman stuck her hand back up. The emperor drew his sword and began to threaten the elderly woman. Carlior told Scarlet that this woman is a criminal who takes other people's souls. That's why she shouldn't be trusted. He told the girl to be more careful, then turned away and started walking. Scarlet apologized to him, and thought to herself. She approached the older woman because she wasn't someone worth killing, wanting to protect Scarlet. Well, the girl couldn't believe that it was possible. After that, she turned to the old woman and said that she was curious to know about fairies, because she believes in them, but she can't see them, so it's all for nothing. Hearing this, the emperor only chuckled and then told them to get going already, sighing heavily. Scarlet thought how selfish the emperor was after all. But she wondered if the innocent girl's mask was working. Scarlet realized that she needed to show not only the crazy, but also the ordinary flaws in order to make it all believable. Not only crazy but uneducated would be a total disaster. Just what Scarlet needed. Yes. Then Carlior suddenly interrupted their awkward silence. He turned to the girl and held out his hand. Then he took it. Scarlet wondered why he had done that. Then suddenly they moved to another place and were already standing next to another dungeon. When the girl looked inside, she saw a man inside and asked if this was the one she was supposed to meet. The emperor moved closer to her ear and said that was correct, and she could ask the girl anything she wanted. Then Scarlet asked who the man was. Carlior said she was the one willing to die to meet Armin. After a short silence, the woman who was in jail asked His Majesty how he was doing. The emperor said he was doing well, and they hadn't seen Fran in a while. The girl confirmed it. Afterward, he said Scarlet could ask a question. But when Fran heard the emperor call the girl young mistress, it surprised her. It was a true sage's eye. But the girl behind the bars noticed that Scarlet was pretty far away now, but she could still see her. The girl took Scarlet's hand and told her that he would come when she made her choice, and called her an unhappy child, and also said that things had already begun to change. What was destined to happen had been destroyed, and only good was ahead of her. The emperor pulled Carlior, that's the girl, aside and said that was enough and to stop. After that, Scarlet asked, "Will His Majesty perhaps let her go already?" Because he's still clasping her to him, trying to hold her. He let go of her and the girl started to fall. The emperor said it was time to go back. Scarlet yelled at him to not let go so abruptly. When Carlior returned to his office, the prime minister came in and told him that the young lady had just gone to her home. When the emperor said nothing, Clover asked what they were doing in the dungeon. He also told him not to say they'd gone to see Fran, but the emperor said that was where they were going. When he heard that, Clover was surprised. Carlior explained to his assistant that she had said Lady Armand was unhappy. Before leaving, Scarlet told the emperor that she was fine and he could take it easy. The emperor replied to her that she could stop pretending and that all was well. Prophecy is only an area with many outcomes, no need to dwell on it. Scarlet ran her hand over the flowers and said she was really fine, and said she wasn't worried about that at all. The girl said that whatever his fate is, he lives only for today, and one should be content with today. That's her motto. And today she was very pleased. When Clover heard all this, he was shocked. He said that it just couldn't be, that Fran was still talking nonsense. What was destined to happen was ruined. Some dubious prediction again. After calming down a bit, the prime minister asked if the young mistress was all right after all this. Carlior said it seemed to go well and she even smiled. In fact, Scarlet was happy because she is a lover of mysticism. At this time in the Armand mansion, when Scarlet got home, she thought that she was very tired after all, and so she would go straight to bed. Isar came out to meet her and asked her if she was back. She hadn't expected to see him, and asked him why he was awake at this late hour. Maybe something had happened, but Isar said wasn't he the one to ask about it? Scarlet didn't understand what it was doing to him and why he was angry. Isar said that if she had come, let her come in and get ready for bed. When he saw the surprise on her face, he said there was something. But before he did, he asked if the girl would be worried. But without waiting for her answer, he said that she didn't seem to remember that she'd almost died last time. Scarlet thought that now she was beginning to worry. Isar asked her if she was not worried at all. When the girl looked at him, she saw that he was crying. She apologized to him and told him she would be back early, and she was wrong. She thanked her half-brother for being so worried about her. But he didn't need to be so worried. Scarlet said she would be more careful and always keep an eye on the time. When she looked at Isar and realized that he had calmed down, and she told him that she would be on her way, and also wished him a good night. Leaving, she thought, he's a really nice guy. She's grateful to him. So she'd try not to die. Of course, there were a few things she needed to do first. 3 days later, Scarlet came to the Imperial Bank and placed the coins on the table in front of the girl. The girl asked, "You say the largest area of the safe zone is west of the Imperial Palace?" Scarlet confirmed. The girl revealed the map and said that she could buy about 300 dimes for her current property. While the girl was explaining, Scarlet heard people whispering that Lady Armand is crazy, and things like that. At this point she thought she could hear everything, actually. But the banker said it wasn't bad, and she would apply for a write-off of the entire amount. The girl said that's great and she needs to sign it then, and she would report the results tonight. With these words she put some documents on the table. Yes, she signed those papers, and immediately thought that everything was going great, and with the land already decided. She told Lord William Lance to get the carriage ready. When the man heard this, he asked if they would go straight to the manor, but Scarlet said no, and explained that they were going to see her new land. When she said that, she smiled happily. After a while, they did arrive. When Scarlet entered the safe zone, she thought it was much closer to the Imperial Palace than it seemed. When the fairies in the original story met Shirla, I said, "Rebirth, you've been starving for 6 months, so they'll be here soon." Fairies love the smell of sweet fruit. They met thanks to Scarlet when she poured juice on Shirla, and it's an important creature that wings an exhausted Shirla. When Scarlet was in the reserve area, she thought that if fairies like fruit, she would buy some seeds on the way back. Well, as for Scarlet herself, she doesn't want much. Just one piece of fairy stone would be enough. At this very time in this place, Carlior and the blonde-haired man were walking and talking. The light-haired man said that apparently the upper Bathory was refusing to pay the toll, most likely the reason being interference in the temple's affairs. There are more problems associated with it today alone, but the Emperor told him to leave them. They would die soon anyway. When the man heard that, he was scared, but Carlior said he could bring his sword to end them right now. When Scarlet heard their conversation, she immediately hid behind a tree to avoid being seen. She realized who it was and thought, did the Emperor decide to take a walk? The blonde-haired guy said he would wait a little longer anyway, and after that would let him know, no matter how he cut off his source of income, it wouldn't break his pride. The girl didn't even notice herself hiding, but then she thought, why should she be the one hiding from a crazy person's point of view? Scarlet is a pleasant encounter. She thought it would be a great surprise, and standing behind a tree whispered, Your Majesty, what is the matter with you? When Carlior heard an incomprehensible sound, he turned around, and immediately a girl jumped out from behind a tree. Scarlet blurted out that she missed him and started running straight for him, but she accidentally tripped, and when she started to fall, Carlior immediately grabbed her. The girl thought at that moment that this was not in her plans. The Emperor said it was a rather unexpected encounter. Scarlet thought he looked even more handsome up close. When she answered nothing, the man asked, and yet, what is she doing here? The girl was very frightened because the Emperor had become very formidable. The blonde-haired boy was standing off to the side when he saw the girl, and then he realized it was Lady Scarlet. But he couldn't understand why she had come out of the woods. The man thought that because of the temple, he was in a bad mood, and it would be unpleasant if he raised a sword against his own bride, that it should be sorted out before it was too late. So he ran up and asked His Majesty if he was all right because he looked tired. He offered to escort the lady, but Carlior didn't listen to him and asked the girl if she didn't like her. Scarlet replied that she had hurt her heart. The Emperor said that she had thrown her heart, though she didn't even fall down. The blonde-haired boy stood back and didn't understand what was going on. He thought that His Majesty probably didn't like it at all, but not to the point where he couldn't even touch it. Scarlet replied that as soon as she looked at his beautiful face, her heart. But the Emperor interrupted her and said that if she could talk such nonsense, there was nothing wrong with her. The blonde-haired guy figured they weren't as bad a relationship as he thought, and decided he wouldn't waste any time. He said that His Majesty had a lot of things to do, so he should go. When the guy heard the approving silence, he immediately went. Scarlet wondered why Carlior didn't go with him. If she had been in his shoes, she would have run away. It wouldn't have been mean. She wondered how much longer she would have to spend with him if nothing changed. The only thing left to do was to wait for death, like in the original story. Scarlet realized that he was a tough enough man, but she decided that enough waiting was enough, and it was time for action. The girl told His Majesty that he had, after all, recently asked what she was doing here. The Emperor said that was correct, and he said she had come to see the land. She explained that she wanted to buy it. When Carlior heard this, he was very surprised and asked what she wanted to do it for. Scarlet then explained that she had been told that fairies would show up here. The Emperor was very surprised when she said this, and asked how old she was this year. The girl screamed and said that there was no connection between age and belief in fairies. If she could have met a fairy, she would not have wasted her fortune. At that moment, She wondered if she looked like a rascal who had wasted all her money by believing a rumor on the level of childish chatter. She thought it was so cheesy that even the emperor couldn't look at her. This result was fine with her. But she thought that was not all, and afterward asked His Majesty, since she was his bride, if he could sell her the land cheaper. There was an awkward silence after those words. Scarlet wondered if she'd overdone it, but the emperor, after a short time, said he was surprised. With these words he began to take off his gloves. Scarlet was startled by this, and wondered why he was taking off his glove. Then she guessed it might be to hit her, and when he took off the gloves, she jerked, closing her eyes. Seeing this, Carlior said that it seemed to him that she was no longer afraid of him, and afterward he added that he would think about her request. When the girl thanked him, he said it was getting late, and she should go back to her place. Before he left, Scarlet told him to be careful too. She got home when it was starting to get dark. Scarlet lay in her bed and wondered why she had said goodbye so absurdly. Then she wondered if she was really very beautiful. She wondered if it was possible to be such a scoundrel. Maybe she thought so, because she had seen him in the woods, not in the banquet hall. But Scarlet realized that it wasn't the forest, but that something had really changed in him. The Charlian tyrant, Carlior, behaved differently with her than he did with other people. Incredibly sensitive to those he loved, but sharp as a knife to others. Scarlet is not Shirl, so she is not one of the people he cares about. But then she doesn't understand why he said he thought she wasn't afraid of him, smiling slightly. Scarlet figured she wouldn't worry about it anymore. He was usually very cold, but she was pleased that it wasn't like that this time. But then suddenly she heard a knock on the door, and she wondered who had come at this hour. She thought it might be the Duke. Well, if he did, he might have been sneaking around lately. When Scarlet doesn't listen to him, he wants to hit her, but she runs away. But she realized that she couldn't escape now. That made her nervous. When she asked who was there, she heard a familiar voice. He said it was him, and let the girl open the door already, and asked if she was asleep. After a little thought, Scarlet realized that the voice belonged to Isar. That surprised her. The girl shouted that it was busy now. Then he asked if it was a restroom, and told her to open the door already. As she went to open the door, she wondered why Isar had suddenly come to her at such a late hour. Then she suggested that he might have come with the Duke. She said she didn't want to and wouldn't open it. Scarlet wondered if he was going to enter a girl's bedroom at this late hour. She thought it was a very bad idea, but Isar didn't know what she was talking about. Scarlet said that he also spoke to her in an orderly tone. The man said he had something to say, so have her open the door. Said she wasn't dressed. That's when Isar got totally pissed off. When he yelled at her, the girl realized that he seemed to be alone. She told him to keep his voice down, because he knew what Melia would do if she thought they were fighting. She walked over, pulling the door ajar, and told him to say what he wanted to say. Isar said it was no big deal. When Scarlet rushed him, he said that today would be fine and let her rest properly. The girl was very surprised by this. She didn't expect him to come to her because he was worried. Scarlet assumed he thought she couldn't sleep for fear of the Duke. And then she opened the door. When Isar saw her, he was very surprised and said that she was wearing clothes. But the girl asked him if he was ill. Scarlet said that he was being nice lately, not like he used to be. But the boy interrupted her and told her to go to bed, then closed the door. Contrary to expectations, the Duke did not summon Scarlet that night. She thought of ways to get him in trouble and prepared for action. She read about different options, such as a winter flower with baldness effects, or a surprise spider from the Mage Tower. Scarlet will only feel sorry for Isar. At the same time, Charlene's, Scarlet's fiancé, thought of her, who knows no fear. A prince who was born under an unlucky star. If left as it is, the imperial family with the entire empire will be trampled. Although the temple head's prediction had no basis, no one dared to oppose his words, as long as the power of the temple was mighty, for the sake of the prosperity of the infinity of their empire. The crown prince is destined to die, so they were told not to worry so much about it, until he fought back against all who believed in this prophecy, and bared his sword for his own life. Even with the goal of survival, if the blood of those they killed could fill an entire sea, he could hardly be called human. And all that remained of him was a new name. Tyrant. Scarlet Armand was special to him. She didn't think of him as a stranger, and she wasn't hard on him. Perhaps if she heard it she would deny it. And of course Charlene sensed all that. Looking at the paper, he thought he said he would consider her offer. but would agree to the request to sell the land cheaper. Driven by either lack of fear or insolence, she said that fairies lived in this land, and now if he refused her, she would surely be angry. And then Carlior suddenly wondered what Scarlet would do if he suddenly changed his mind. The next morning, Scarlet received documents from the Imperial Palace about the transfer of the safe zone. They were brought in by Shadow Number 1, Charlene's undercover assignment crony. He told the girl to read it carefully and sign it. She thanked him and wondered how much he had saved in price. But when she opened the documents, she was very surprised, because the price was the same. So Scarlet asked the man if the owner said anything else. The man asked if there was some problem with the document, but the girl answered that it wasn't that. When the man thought that she seemed to want to meet under the pretext of making a contract, and replied that His Majesty had left no particular instructions, but he said if she wanted, he could arrange an audience for her. He'd fit everything into the schedule. At this point, Scarlet thought Charlene's had said he would think about it, but he was just playing with her. The man asked what was the matter with the lady. He wondered if he should tell His Majesty, because the Emperor had said to memorize everything the girl said, and to come back. Then Scarlet giggled and said that she was overexcited and for him to forget the whole thing and ignore it. The man thought she was even weirder than he'd heard, and told the girl to sign the contract then. Scarlet thought at that moment that the Emperor was playing with her, and wondered if she should too. But she agreed to sign the contract. At this moment, the guy thought that it couldn't be. The Emperor and Mistress are really in love with each other. Yes, there's also so much manipulation coming from the Emperor's fiancée. Momentarily, Scarlet took the pen and signed the contract, asking if that was it. The man said that was the end of it. Now all that was left was to wait for the Imperial Palace's approval, and that would be the end of the process. But Scarlet doubted it very much, and being outside, the man said he would go then. The girl said he had done a good job. When he left, Lucy asked her mistress if she needed to set her table. Scarlet told her to get the carriage ready. When the maid asked where she would go, the girl said to the bank, and she would take another look at the land she had bought. After Scarlet drove, she opened her dessert that she had packed for the road, and thought that now she felt calm. She trusted Charlene's too much. She thought she could buy the land for half price, but what he said really felt like the truth. He even said he'd think about it. Scarlet wondered why he hadn't gotten angry at the request to sell the land cheaper. And then she remembered that she hadn't gone to the magic flower shop. So she decided she'd go around today. When she looked out the window, she thought the weather was really fine. Then she asked the coachman how much longer until they arrived. He replied that they were almost there. When the girl got out of the wagon, she wondered where this flower shop was. Looking at the map, she wondered if she had gotten off at the wrong place. She walked around the streets for a while, not knowing where to go. But suddenly she heard someone calling her. She heard a woman's voice and turned around. The girl asked if Scarlet was looking for directions. The girl said some people say she's lost her mind, but it must be just a little trouble with her head. The girl said that last time she was so shocked that she even fell down, but this time is different. Scarlet looked at the stranger and didn't realize who she was.